The great ship hung in the dark silence above the blue and white world. It was called the Star Treader. It was a ship of the Galactic Federation, a place of quiet order and pure logic. On its bridge, a being named Kale looked at the planet below. His skin was pale gray, and his large black eyes showed no emotion. He was the mission commander. His job was simple. He had to decide the fate of the world below. The planet was called Earth. Its dominant species called themselves humans. The Federation saw them as a puzzle. They were not very strong. They were not very fast. Their technology was still young, but they had spread across their world in a very short time. They built great cities and created complex societies, yet their history was full of war and violence. They were ruled by their emotions. This made them unpredictable. To the Federation, unpredictability was dangerous, so they sent down an observer. Its name was T7. It was a xylosan. Xylosans were perfect for this job. They were created to be scientists. They felt no fear. They felt no anger. They felt no happiness or sadness. They only observed and recorded data. They were completely objective. A xylosan would never lie in its report. It would only state the facts. T7's mission was to study the humans and their world, especially its most dangerous animals. The Federation's files on Earth called these animals monsters. T7 was to see how the humans lived with these monsters. Were they masters of the dangerous world? Or were they just lucky, living on the edge of disaster? The answer would decide everything. If humans were a threat, they might be destroyed. If they were weak, they would be placed in a quiet quarantine, cut off from the galaxy forever. They would be protected, but they would never know there was anything else out here. T7 landed on Earth in a quiet, hidden place. It used its advanced technology to create a human body for itself. It looked like a man in his early 30s. It gave itself a simple, common name from the region, Tae. It dressed in simple, comfortable clothes. It learned the local language, Korean, perfectly from its orbital scans. Then it walked into a small fishing village on the eastern coast. The village was called Seongsan. It was a place of quiet rhythms. The air smelled of salt and fish. The people were kind, but they kept to themselves. When a stranger named Tae arrived, saying he was a researcher studying local wildlife, they welcomed him with a quiet curiosity. They found him a small empty room above an old storage shed. It was perfect for his needs. Tae started his work. He walked through the village every day. He watched everything. He recorded everything. His eyes, which seemed so calm and observant, were actually high-resolution scanners. His ears recorded every sound. His mind was a powerful computer, analyzing every piece of data. His first reports to Commander Kyle on the Star Treader were exactly what the Federation expected. Subject, Canis lupus familiaris. Local designation, dog. A domesticated carnivore. Initial threat, minimal. Observation. Humans engage in illogical nurturing behavior towards this species. Efficiency, questionable. He had seen an old woman, Mrs. Kim, feeding pieces of fish to a small, fluffy white dog. She talked to it in a high, silly voice. The dog wagged its tail. Tae calculated the energy spent by Mrs. Kim to catch the fish, prepare it, and then give it to a non-working animal. It was a net loss of resources. There was no logical reason for it. He saw another thing he could not explain. A young man named June was the caretaker of the small village temple. He was a quiet man with a gentle smile. Every evening, June would go to the back of the temple with a bowl of food. He would make a small clicking sound with his tongue. From the shadows, several thin cats would appear. They would rub against his legs and eat the food he put down. Tae observed this for many nights. He recorded in his report, subject Phalus catus, local designation cat, a small solitary predator. Observation. Human male, designation June, provides regular sustenance to multiple feral specimens. The animals provide no labor, no protection, and no useful resource. This is a consistent species-wide behavior. Conclusion. Humans have a deep-seated illogical drive to form emotional bonds with lesser species, even at a cost to themselves. On the ship, Kale read these reports and was pleased. This was the confirmation he needed. Humans were emotional and irrational. They wasted energy on creatures that did not help them survive. This was a sign of a weak species, a species that would not be able to handle the harsh truths of the galaxy. A few days later, Tae saw something new. A woman arrived in the village. She drove a green truck with the logo of the National Park Service. Her name was Sumin. She was a park ranger. She had a confident walk and a direct way of speaking. Her job was to protect the wildlife in the nearby mountains and forests. Tay saw her talking to the village leader. He moved closer, pretending to look at some fishing nets so he could hear their conversation. "We've had more reports," Sumin was saying. "Another farmer lost a goat 2 nights ago. The fence was broken, not chewed. It was smashed." The village leader nodded, his face worried. "Is it a bear, Ranger Kim?" "Maybe," Sumin said. "But the tracks are strange. And the way the animal was taken, it's not like any bear I've seen. I'm going to set up some cameras in the high valley. I could use a guide who knows the area." Tay saw his opportunity. This was a chance to observe a human interacting directly with a potential monster. He stepped forward. "I am sorry for interrupting," he said, bowing slightly. "My name is Tay. I'm a researcher studying local animals. I know the high trails. Perhaps I can help you." Sumin looked at him. Her eyes were brown and sharp. They seemed to take in every detail about him. She smiled, a quick, genuine smile. "A researcher? Perfect. I could use an extra pair of eyes. Meet me here tomorrow at sunrise. Wear good boots." The next morning, Tay met Sumin at her truck. They drove up a winding dirt road into the mountains. The air grew cooler. The tall trees blocked out the sun, creating a world of green shadows. Tay sat quietly, watching Sumin. She talked easily as she drove. "So what are you researching, Taisi?" she asked, using the polite term for his name. "Behavioral patterns," Tay answered, which was not a lie. "I am interested in how humans and animals live together." "It's a complicated relationship," Sumin said with a small laugh. "Sometimes we protect them. Sometimes we are afraid of them. Sometimes we are the monsters they should be afraid of." Tay stored that statement for later analysis. The concept of humans being the monsters was a new data point. They parked the truck and started hiking. Sumin moved with a smooth, practiced grace. Tay matched her step for step, his body perfectly coordinated. They checked the cameras she had set up earlier. Most showed nothing, but one camera, deep in a rocky ravine, was broken. The metal was twisted and the lens was shattered. Sumin knelt down, her smile gone. "This wasn't a bear," she said quietly. "A bear might knock it over, but it wouldn't do this." She pointed to deep scratches in the metal. They were long and parallel, like giant claws, but the spacing was wrong for any bear known in the region. Tay scanned the area. His sensors picked up a residue on the broken camera. It was a biological material, but its composition was unknown. There was also a faint, strange smell in the air. It was musky and electric, like the air after a lightning storm. "Something new," Tay said, more to himself than to her. "Maybe," Sumin said, standing up. Her face was serious. "Or something very old that we've forgotten about." They spent the rest of the day following the trail. It was difficult. Whatever they were tracking was smart and moved over the rocks, leaving few traces. But Tay's advanced sensors could see things human eyes could not. He could see the faint heat signature where the creature had rested. He could see the microscopic fibers from its hide caught on the bark of a tree. As the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, they entered a deep, narrow canyon. The air grew cold. The only sound was the wind whistling through the rocks, then they heard it. A low pained sound. It was a deep guttural rumble mixed with a raspy, breathy whistle. Sumin stopped and held up her hand. She pointed ahead to a dark opening under a large overhanging rock. Tay looked, and for the first time since his activation, his logical mind experienced something it could not immediately process. There, lying in the shadows, was the creature. It was like nothing in the Federation's files. It was long and serpentine, bigger than a horse. Its body was covered not in scales but in beautiful iridescent feathers that shimmered with hints of green and bronze in the fading light. It had a head that reminded him of a giant bird, with a sharp beak and a crest of brilliant blue feathers. But its eyes were large and intelligent, full of pain and fear. One of its large, bat-like wings was bent underneath it at a wrong angle. A deep, nasty gash on its flank oozed a faint, glowing fluid onto the rock. This was the monster. This was the Giryong from the local myths, a creature of legend made real. Tay's programming took over. The analysis was instant. Subject unclassified megafauna. Threat level extreme. Current status compromised. Recommended action. Immediate termination for biological sampling. Without a word, Tay raised his right hand. His sleeve slid back slightly. From a hidden port on his wrist, a small metallic barrel extended. It was a bioblaster set to kill. A small red dot appeared on the creature's feathered head. The creature saw him. Its intelligent eyes widened in terror. It tried to lift its head and let out a weak, defiant hiss, but it was too weak to move. "Don't!" The word was sharp and loud in the quiet canyon. Sumin's hand slammed down on his arm, forcing his aim away from the creature. Her face was a mix of shock and anger. "Tay, what are you doing?" she yelled, her voice echoing off the stone walls. The canyon was suddenly very quiet. The only sound was the ragged, pained breathing of the creature, and the quick, angry breaths from Sumin. She stared at Tay, her hand still firmly gripping his arm, pushing the strange metallic device on his wrist towards the ground. "What are you doing?" she asked again, her voice lower now but still sharp with disbelief. Tay's mind, a place of pure logic, scrambled to process this interruption. His internal systems had already calculated the perfect shot. The threat would have been neutralized. The mission would be advancing. This human was interfering with a primary objective. "It is a dangerous creature," Tay said, his voice flat and calm, a stark contrast to her emotional tone. "It has been preying on the local food supply. It represents a clear threat to human safety. Eliminating it is the logical course of action." Sumin's eyes widened. "Logical?" She looked from his blank face to the terrified animal. "Look at it, Tay. It's injured. It's scared. It's not hunting for fun. It's probably starving and hurt, driven down from its real home because it can't hunt properly anymore. We don't just kill things because they're dangerous." This statement created a cascade of errors in Tai's programming. We don't just kill things because they're dangerous. It contradicted basic survival protocols. A threat was a threat. Its status, its reasons were irrelevant. Neutralize the threat. Ensure safety. This was the foundation of all Federation security policy. Sumin let go of his arm and slowly turned her back to him. It was a gesture of such immense trust or foolishness that Tay paused. She was putting herself between his weapon and the creature. She was making herself vulnerable. "Shh, it's okay," she murmured, not to Tay but to the beast. She kept her body low and moved forward one slow step at a time. Her hands were open and empty at her sides. "No one is going to hurt you. We just want to see what's wrong." Tay watched, his blaster still active but no longer aimed. He was now an observer again. This was new data. A human engaging a high-threat entity not with force but with soothing sounds. The creature, which he had designated Giryong, watched her approach. Its large, intelligent eyes followed her every move. The defensive hissing softened. Its head, which it had struggled to lift, sank back to the ground, though it still watched her warily. "It's okay," Sumin repeated, her voice a soft, steady rhythm. She was now within touching distance. She slowly knelt down, her eyes never leaving the creature's. She looked at the bent wing, at the nasty gash oozing faintly glowing fluid. "You're in a real mess, aren't you?" She glanced back at Tay. "I have a first aid kit in my pack. Bring it and put that thing away." For a moment, Tay hesitated. The command from Commander Kale was clear. Study and, if possible, acquire the specimen. This was his chance. But Sumin's order was direct and present. His programming, which included maintaining his cover, dictated that he obey the local authority figure in non-critical situations. He retracted the blaster into his wrist. The smooth metal disappeared, leaving his human-looking skin unmarked. He walked back to where they had dropped their packs and retrieved her large green medical kit. When he returned, Sumin was still talking softly to the creature. She had taken out a large water bottle and was carefully pouring water over the gash on its flank, washing away dirt and dried blood. The creature flinched but did not attack. It let out a low groaning sound. "It hurts, I know," she said, "but we have to clean it." Tay stood nearby holding the kit. "Your actions are illogical," he stated, unable to stop himself from reporting the observation. "You are risking your life for a predator that would likely kill you if it were healthy." Sumin didn't look up from her work. "Is that all you see? A predator? Look at its eyes, Tay." Tay looked. He scanned the eyes. They were complex organs capable of detailed vision. But he saw more. He saw the dilation of the pupils, the way they tracked Sumin's movements not with hunting focus but with a kind of desperate attention. He saw the pain, and beneath the pain a spark of something else. Curiosity, intelligence. "It's scared," Sumin said, as if reading his thoughts. "It's in pain. It doesn't know if we are here to help it or hurt it. I'm trying to show it we want to help." She opened the kit and took out a roll of bandage and a packet of antiseptic wipes. "I need your help now. I need you to hold this end of the bandage. I have to wrap its wing to keep it still." Tay moved forward. The creature tensed as he approached, a low rumble building in its chest. "It's okay," Sumin said, her hand resting gently on the creature's feathered neck. "He's with me. He's going to help." Slowly, carefully, Tay knelt beside her. The creature watched him, its breath warm and smelling of earth and ozone. Tay took the end of the bandage. His movements were precise and efficient. He held the wing steady while Sumin worked. She was not a doctor, but she was skilled and confident. She cleaned the wound on its flank as best she could, the strange glowing fluid staining the antiseptic wipes. She splinted the broken wing bone with a piece of wood from a broken branch and tightly wrapped it with the bandage. Throughout the entire process, the creature remained still. It flinched and whined, but it did not struggle. It seemed to understand on some deep level that these strange two-legged beings were not there to cause more harm. When they were finished, the sun had fully set. The canyon was dark, lit only by the rising moon and the faint soft glow from the creature's wound. "We can't leave it here," Sumin said, wiping her brow. "It can't fly. It can't hunt. It will starve or something else will find it." "What do you propose?" Tay asked. The original mission objective, termination, now seemed distant, replaced by this confusing new scenario. "There's an old ranger cabin not far from here. It's abandoned. We can take it there. It will be safe while it heals." Moving the creature was a difficult task. It was heavy and awkward. Sumin found 2 long, strong branches, and using an emergency blanket from her pack, they made a rough stretcher. It took all of their strength to roll the creature onto it. Tay, with his hidden xylosan strength, did most of the lifting, but he was careful to make it look like a struggle. They carried the creature through the dark forest. Sumin led the way with a flashlight. The creature was silent during the journey, its large eyes looking up at the stars between the tree branches. The cabin was small, made of logs, with a dusty wooden floor and a stone fireplace. They carefully laid the stretcher down near the fireplace. Sumin built a small fire for warmth while Tay stood watch, his sensors scanning the surrounding forest for any other threats. For the next 3 days, this became their routine. Sumin would go back to her truck to radio her office, telling them she was following a strong lead and would be off-grid for a few days. Then she would return to the cabin with food and supplies, for them and for the creature. She started calling it Yong. It was a simple name, from the Korean word for dragon. "It's easier than saying the creature all the time," she explained to Tay. Tay observed everything. He watched as Sumin changed Yong's bandages. He watched as she fed Yong pieces of fish and meat she had brought. He watched as the creature's fear slowly turned into a wary acceptance, and then into something that looked like trust. Yong would nudge Sumin's hand with its beak when she arrived. It would make a soft, rumbling, purring sound when she sat beside it. It was a bond. An irrational, emotional, illogical bond. Tay's reports to the Star Treader became conflicted. The Guy Ryong, designated Yong, demonstrates complex problem-solving skills. It accepts food from Ranger Sumin's hand. It has ceased all aggressive posturing. My initial threat assessment requires recalibration. Observation. When Sumin is near, Yong's biosignatures indicate a state analogous to mammalian contentment. When she leaves, the signatures indicate distress. This suggests an attachment. The utility of this bond is unclear. Back on the ship, Commander Kale grew impatient. He sent a new command. "The specimen is docile. The observation period is over. Secure it and return to the ship for final analysis. We have our data." The order was clear. It was time to complete the mission. Tay was to sedate Yong and bring it aboard. That night, as Sumin slept exhausted on an old cot in the corner of the cabin, Tay stood over Yong. The creature was sleeping, its chest rising and falling steadily. The glow from its wound was dimmer now, a sign it was healing. Tay held a sedative dart in his hand. It would be simple. A quick injection. Then he could activate his personal transporter and take Yong to the ship. The mission would be a success. He looked at Yong's peaceful face. He remembered the terror in its eyes when he had first aimed the blaster. He remembered the kindness in Sumin's voice when she told him to stop. He calculated the cold, sterile fate that awaited Yang on the Star Treader. It would be a specimen. It would be scanned, probed, and likely dissected to understand its biology. Its life would end on a metal table. Then he looked at Sumin, sleeping deeply. She had fought so hard to save this life. His hand, which was always steady, trembled. A conflict raged within his circuits. Logic said to follow the order. But a new, strange data stream, built from days of watching compassion in action, argued back. It argued for the value of the bond. It argued for the life that had been saved. That night, for the first time, a Xylosan made a choice that was not based on logic. It was based on something else entirely. When Sumin awoke with the dawn, the cabin was different. The fire was out. Tay was gone. Young was gone. For a terrible moment, her heart sank. Had he taken it? Had he killed it after all? Then she saw it. A piece of paper folded neatly was placed on the stone hearth. She picked it up with shaking hands. The writing was in perfect, neat Korean. Young is safe. Thank you for teaching me. She read the words over and over. She didn't understand where they had gone or how. But she felt a sudden sure certainty. Tay was strange, but he was not a liar. Young was safe. She sat down on the cot, the note in her hand, and looked at the empty space where the magnificent creature had been. The cabin felt very, very empty. The transport beam on the Star Treader was a silent, shimmering column of light. When it faded, T7 stood in the center of the chamber. Its human form, Tay, was gone. It was back to its true Xylosan body, a tall, slender being with pale gray skin and large, dark eyes. Its face showed no emotion, but it was not alone. Crouched on the floor beside it, confused and trembling, was Yang. The creature's feathers were puffed up in fear. Its head darted from side to side, taking in the cold, metallic walls, the bright artificial lights, and the strange, humming sounds of the ship. It let out a low, worried warble. The door to the chamber hissed open. Commander Kale stood there, his own dark eyes wide with shock and then narrowing into slits of anger. He was not alone. 2 other Xylosan security officers stood behind him, their postures rigid. T7, Kale's voice was a sharp crack in the quiet room. What is the meaning of this? Explain this contamination. You were ordered to bring the specimen for analysis, not to travel with it. T7 looked at Kale. Its mind, which had always followed orders without question, felt different. It was filled with new data. The memory of Sumin's smile, the feeling of Yang's trust, the choice to protect instead of destroy. The mission parameters were flawed, Commander, T7 said, its voice the same flat tone as always. But the words were revolutionary. Flawed? Kale took a step forward. You were sent to study Earth's monsters. You were to assess the human response to them. The report was clear. Humans are irrational and emotional. They are a weak species. We will place them under quarantine. The mission was a success. Until this. He gestured angrily at Yang, who flinched back from the sudden movement. T7 placed a hand on Yang's neck. The gesture was calm, reassuring. It was a gesture it had learned from Sumin. Yang's trembling lessened. It leaned into the touch, a soft, rumbling purr starting in its chest. The sound was deeply out of place in the sterile room. You asked me to bring back a specimen of Earth's monsters for analysis, T7 stated. I have, Kale stared. What are you talking about? That creature is the monster. It is the subject of your study. T7 looked from Kale's angry face to the calm, trusting face of Yang. I did study the monsters. I studied the humans. I saw them cut down their forests and poison their oceans. I saw the violence in their history. They are capable of being the greatest monsters of all. Their capacity for destruction is immense. Kale nodded slowly. Exactly. So the decision is made. They are a danger to themselves and to the galaxy. But, T7 continued, and the word hung in the air. A Xylosan report never had a but. It only had facts and conclusions. I also saw a woman named Sumin. She saw a terrified, injured creature. She did not see a monster. She saw a life. She risked her own safety to show it kindness. She used her resources to help it heal. She did not ask for anything in return. T7 looked directly at Kale. You sent me to find a monster. I found 2 kinds. One kind has claws and teeth. The other kind has hate and fear in its heart. But I also found something else. I found a human who chose compassion over fear. She did not see a thing to be studied. She saw a person to be helped. Kale was silent for a long moment. The security officers watched, waiting for his command. This is irrelevant. The human's individual action does not change the species classification. It is an outlier. A statistical error, is it? T7 asked. Or is it the most important data point of all? You define strength by power and logic. But is it not also strength to show mercy? Is it not also power to heal instead of harm? T7 moved its hand gently over Yong's feathers. This creature, Yong, was a monster to you. To the farmers, it was a thief. But to Sumin, it was a patient. A friend, she named it. She taught me that a name is important. A name means you are a person, not a thing. You asked for a specimen. I did not bring you a thing. I brought you a person. My friend. The word friend echoed in the room. It was a word with no place in the Xylosan language. It was a human word. An emotional word. Kyle was stunned. He looked at T7, at the creature, at the clear bond between them. This was not in any mission protocol. A Xylosan did not make friends. A Xylosan did not disobey. A Xylosan did not choose. What has happened to you, T7? Kale asked, his voice quieter now, filled with confusion. Your programming? It is compromised. My understanding has expanded, T7 corrected him. I have learned that the most dangerous thing in the universe is not a creature with claws and teeth. It is a heart without empathy, and the most powerful thing is the opposite. T7 took a final step, making its new purpose clear. So I did not come back with a specimen. I came back with my pet, and I believe we have much to teach you. Commander Kale stood frozen. The logic of the Federation was clear. T7 was malfunctioning. The creature was a contaminant. The standard procedure was to decommission the operative and dissect the specimen, but as he looked at the two of them, the logical Xylosan, who had learned compassion, and the mythical beast who showed trust, a tiny, impossible crack appeared in his own absolute certainty. The human, Sumin, had changed T7 with a simple act of kindness. And now T7 was trying to change them. Kale looked at Yong. The creature was no longer trembling. It was watching him, its head tilted, its intelligent eyes curious. It was not a monster. It was just an animal, far from home, scared but brave. He looked at T7. His perfect objective operative was gone. In its place was something new, something unpredictable, something more. Kale made a decision. It was not a logical one. It was a choice. He turned to the security officers. Stand down, he said. The officers looked at him, surprised. But they obeyed. Kale turned back to T7 and Yong. The fate of Earth is postponed, he said, his voice heavy with the weight of his unprecedented choice. Your pet will be given quarters. You will be responsible for it. T7 gave a slow, deliberate nod. It was not a Xylosan gesture. It was a human one. A gesture of thanks and understanding. Come, Yong, T7 said, turning. The creature stood up on its shaky legs. It gave one last look at Commander Kale, then followed T7 out of the transport chamber and into the bright, sterile hallway of the starship. The giant, feathered dragon walked beside the slender gray alien, a living piece of Earth myth now walking under the lights of a distant sun. The mission to study Earth's monsters was over. A new mission, one of understanding, had just begun, and it had started with a simple act of kindness in a quiet canyon on a blue-green world. The sterile, quiet halls of the Star Treader were no longer quiet. The soft, clicking sound of claws on metal followed T7 wherever it went. Yong walked beside it, its large, feathered body a splash of vibrant color against the ship's gray walls. Its head swiveled constantly, its intelligent eyes taking in everything. The closed doors, the glowing control panels, the few other Xylosan crew members who stopped and stared with unreadable expressions. Commander Kale had kept his word. He had given them a small, unused storage room to use as quarters. It was not comfortable, but it was private. T7 had found some old cargo padding to make a soft nest for Yong, but the creature was restless. It missed the open sky. It missed the feel of the sun and the smell of the forest. It missed Sumin. T7 could see this in the way Yong's feathers would sometimes droop. It could hear it in the low, sad whistles the creature made when it thought it was alone. T7's sensors detected a constant, low-level stress in Yong's biology. The ship's environment was wrong for it. The air was too dry. The food, synthesized nutrient paste, was bland and unappealing. Yang picked at it without interest. T7 spent its days trying to care for its pet. It read everything in the Federation database about caring for non-sentient life forms, but the instructions were cold and clinical. Provide adequate sustenance. Maintain a clean environment. There was nothing about comforting a homesick creature. There was no data on how to be a friend. One day, T7 was in the ship's main computer core, running a diagnostic on its own systems. Yang was with it, lying on the cool floor looking bored. A junior technician, a young Xylosin named Lyra, was working at a nearby console. She was careful, always following the rules. She had been told to ignore the strange creature, but she couldn't help stealing glances at it. Yang, feeling her gaze, lifted its head. It let out a soft, questioning chirp. Lyra quickly looked away, her fingers moving faster on her console. T7 observed the interaction. It was the same reaction most of the crew had. Fear, or at least a deep caution. They saw Yang as a thing, an animal, a problem. Later that day, T7 tried to take Yang to the ship's observation deck. It was a large room with a huge window that looked out at the stars. T7 thought Yang might like to see the open space, but the moment they entered, a senior officer was there. "This area is for crew contemplation only," the officer said, his voice cold. "That organism is not permitted. It is a biohazard." Yang, sensing the hostility, tucked its head behind T7's leg. T7 did not argue. It simply turned and left. But inside, its circuits hummed with a new feeling. It was a feeling it had learned from Sumin. It was the feeling you get when you see someone being treated unfairly. It was protectiveness. The problem was the crew's perception. They saw a monster because that was what they were told to see. T7 needed to make them see what it saw. It needed to make them see Yang. The next morning, T7 went to the ship's food synthesis lab. It had an idea. It called up the chemical composition of the fish Sumin had fed Yang. It spent hours adjusting the synthesizer, trying to replicate the exact taste and smell. When it was finished, it had a small gray cake that looked exactly like the nutrient paste, but it smelled strongly of the sea. T7 brought it to their quarters. Yang was lying in its nest, not moving. It looked up without interest as T7 entered. Then its head lifted. Its nostrils flared. It let out an excited chirp and scrambled to its feet. It eagerly took the food cake from T7's hand and devoured it in 2 bites. It then nudged T7's hand, looking for more. It was the first time Yang had shown real excitement in days. T7 made a note. The right food was important. It was a small thing, but it mattered. The next part of the plan was harder. T7 needed to show the crew that Yang was intelligent. It decided to start with Lyra, the junior technician. She seemed less rigid than the others. T7 found Lyra alone in a secondary control room. Yang followed close behind. "Technician Lyra," T7 said. "I require assistance." Lyra looked up, her eyes darting nervously to Yang. "What is your requirement, T7? "My companion is bored," T7 stated simply. "Boredom leads to stress and behavioral problems. I have observed that puzzle solving can provide mental stimulation." Lyra blinked. "Puzzle solving? For the animal?" "It is not an animal. It is Yang." T7 placed a small, complex metal puzzle on her console. It was a training tool for young engineers, a series of interlocking rings that had to be separated. "I would like you to show Yang how it works." Lyra looked like she wanted to refuse, but curiosity got the better of her. Slowly, she picked up the puzzle. She manipulated the rings, showing how one could be twisted and pulled to separate from the others. She then put it back together and placed it on the floor in front of Yang. Yang looked at the puzzle, then at Lyra, then at T7. It lowered its head and nudged the rings with its beak. It tried to bite one. Then it stopped. It seemed to think. It used one of its claws to hold the base steady, just as Lyra had done. Then with delicate movements of its beak, it began to twist and turn the rings. It was clumsy at first, but after a few minutes, there was a click. One ring came free. Yang picked up the loose ring in its beak, looked at Lyra, and dropped it at her feet. It made a proud chirping sound. Lyra's mouth, usually a firm, neutral line, fell slightly open. She stared at the ring, then at Yang. It understood," she whispered. "It learned," T7 corrected. From that day on, Lyra was different. She started greeting Yang when she saw it. She even started bringing it small, shiny objects she thought it might like. A broken piece of crystal. A polished washer. Yang would take them gently and add them to its nest, its collection of treasures. The change was slow, but it spread. Other crew members saw Lyra interacting with the monster without fear. They saw Yang solving puzzles. They saw it following T7 like a shadow, not with animal instinct, but with clear attachment. One day, Commander Kale summoned T7 to the observation deck. He stood by the great window, looking out at a swirling nebula of pink and blue gas. "Your pet," Kale began, not turning around. "It is causing disruptions." "The crew is distracted." T7 stood silently, waiting. Kale turned. His face was still stern, but the anger was gone. It was replaced by a tired confusion. "Lyra has submitted a request to redesign part of the cargo bay into an open space with simulated sunlight and organic material. For the creature's well-being." T7 said nothing. "The Council has reviewed your final report from Earth," Kale continued. "They are not pleased. Your conclusions are unsupported by standard metrics. Your actions were a direct violation of protocol." T7 remained silent. It knew this was true. And yet, Kale sighed, a very human sound. "The crew's efficiency ratings have not dropped. In some areas, they have improved. Morale is different. There is more conversation, more curiosity." He looked directly at T7. "They are becoming illogical." "Perhaps," T7 said, "they are becoming more. You wanted to understand humanity. You cannot understand them by watching from a distance. You must experience what they value. Compassion, curiosity, friendship. Yang is teaching them." Kale looked back out the window at the vast, beautiful, and empty universe. A decision on Earth is still pending. The Council is divided. Just then, the door hissed open. Yang walked in. It had learned how to open the simple lever-style doors with its beak. It walked over to T7 and nudged its hand, then looked up at the magnificent view of the nebula. It let out a soft, awe-filled warble, its feathers shimmering in the starlight. Kale watched the creature. He saw the intelligence in its eyes. He saw the bond it shared with T7. He saw for the first time not a monster but a living being full of wonder. He did not order them to leave. He just stood and watched as the dragon and the Xylosin looked out at the stars together. The mission was over, but a new understanding was just beginning to grow, one small act of kindness at a time. The change on the Star Treader was slow, like a plant growing in the dark. It started with small things. A technician named Lyra left a shiny data chip for Yang on a console. Another crew member, a botanist named Ren, synthesized a plant that smelled like pine from Earth and gave a clipping to T7 for Yang's nest. The creature loved it, rubbing its face on the leaves and making a happy rumbling sound. The crew was no longer afraid. They were curious. They saw that Yang was not a mindless beast. It was intelligent. It was curious. It had a personality. It liked shiny things and hated the loud noise of the engine room. It learned the daily routines of the ship and would often be waiting at the door of the mess hall when the shift change happened, hoping for a friendly pat on the head or a piece of fruit that someone had synthesized for it. Commander Kale saw all of this. He read the reports. Morale was up. The crew was more communicative. They were solving problems with more creativity. The strict, silent order of the ship was being replaced by a softer, warmer atmosphere. It was illogical. It was unpredictable. And yet he could not deny the positive results. One day, Kale called T7 to his office. Yang, as usual, followed like a large, feathered shadow. "The High Council has reached a decision on Earth," Kale said, his voice flat. He looked tired. "They have reviewed your final report. They agree that the human, Su-Min, displayed illogical and inefficient behavior. They see her actions as a sign of weakness. A species that wastes resources on non-essential life forms cannot be trusted with advanced technology or interstellar travel. They have voted for a Class 5 quarantine. A silent shield will be placed around the solar system. Humanity will never know we were here. They will live out their existence isolated and safe." T7 stood perfectly still. Its mission was complete. The Federation had made its logical choice, but the choice felt like a failure. It felt wrong. "That is not the right decision," T7 said. Kale's head snapped up. A Xylosan did not question the Council. "The decision is made." "It is logical, is it?" T7 asked. "What is the purpose of the Federation? Is it only to find species that are strong in the same way we are? Is strength only about logic and efficiency?" Su-Min was not efficient, but her compassion changed me. Her compassion, flowing through my actions, has changed this ship. "Has that change been bad?" Kale did not answer. He looked at Yang. The creature was watching him, its head tilted. It seemed to sense the serious mood. It took a slow, careful step forward. Then another. It stopped in front of Kale's desk. Kale watched it, wary. Yang slowly lowered its head. It rested its beak gently on the surface of Kale's metal desk. It let out a soft, deep purr. It was a sound of comfort, a sound of trust. T7 spoke quietly. "You sent me to study Earth's monsters, Commander. I learned that the real monster is not what you fear, but the fear itself. The fear of things that are different. The fear of emotion. The fear of connection. That fear is what builds walls and enforces quarantines." Sumin was not afraid. She reached out, and she saved a life. She saved 2 lives. Kale looked from Yang's trusting face to T7's determined one. He thought about the silent, lonely fate that awaited Earth. He thought about the woman, Sumin, who would never know that her simple act of kindness had reverberated across the stars. He thought about his own crew, who had become more than just efficient machines because of a creature they had initially feared. The logic of the Council was perfect. It was cold, and it was clean, and it was safe, but it was also empty. Kyle reached out a hand. It was a slow, hesitant movement. He paused, his fingers just inches from Yang's head. Yang did not move. It just kept purring, its eyes half closed. Kale took a breath and completed the movement. He touched the feathers on top of Yang's head. They were surprisingly soft and warm. A feeling strange and foreign stirred inside him. It was not logic. It was a sense of connection, a sense of wonder. He pulled his hand back. He looked at T7. "The Council's decision is final. There is no protocol to appeal it." T7 nodded. "I understand. But," Kale said, and the word hung in the air, full of possibility. "The order is for a silent quarantine. The humans are not to be contacted. The order says nothing about observation." T7's dark eyes seemed to brighten. "Observation is a primary function of this vessel." "Indeed," Kale said. "A long-term, deep-cover observational mission would be a logical next step. To see if Sumin's actions were an outlier, or a common trait. It would require a small team, a commander to oversee the mission, a specialist in human behavior, and perhaps a biological expert to continue studies of the local fauna." A small, almost invisible smile touched T7's lips. It was a human expression. That would be a logical use of our resources. A few days later, the Star Treader hung once more in orbit around the blue planet. In the transport room, T7 stood in its human form, Tay. Beside it, Commander Kale now wore the body of a serious-looking man with gray-streaked hair. And between them, Yang shifted excitedly. It could smell the planet below. It could smell home. The transport beam activated. In a flash of light, they appeared in the same rocky canyon where it had all begun. The air was fresh and cool. The sun was warm. Yang let out a loud, joyful cry and stretched its wings. The splint was gone. The wound was healed. It beat its powerful wings, lifting into the air for a moment before landing again, running in happy circles around T7 and Kyle. They had a new mission. To live among the humans. To learn from them. To quietly protect them, not from a distance but from within, and maybe one day to show them that they were not alone in the universe. T7 as Tay looked up at the sky. It knew that somewhere in the village Sumin was going about her day. She would never know the full story. She would never know that she had saved a dragon and changed the minds of aliens. She had simply shown kindness to a creature in need. And in the end, that simple act had been the most powerful force of all. It had not just saved a life. It had opened a heart, and then it had opened a world. The mission to study monsters was over. The mission to understand humanity had just begun, and it started with a park ranger, a Xylosan, and a dragon walking out of the mountains together.